All right, folks, I want to welcome our guest to the show. It is Eric Mintel. Welcome to the show, Eric.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks for having me here.
I've been excited to talk to you, man. I was so glad that once again I reached out to Alex Hychek and said, "Hey, will you hook me up with Eric? I've got to get him on the show." And of course, Alex was very glad to do that. So I'm really glad that you're here, man. Let's get right into it. Let's talk a little bit about who you are. Some people may not be familiar with you, but let's give them a little bit of your background. Tell them a little bit about who you are and what got you interested in the paranormal, Bigfoot, and Dogman of all things.
Yeah. Oh man. Well, I first of all, thank you, Alex and Doug as well. I'm primarily a professional jazz musician. Have been so. This is my 30th year as a jazz man, but have always loved the paranormal. And in my jazz career, we've had incredible performances. We were invited to perform twice at the White House. Played for President Clinton in 1998, President Obama in 2011. We've played at the United Nations, at the Kennedy Center several times. So, and then we tour all over the country, everywhere you could think, like concert halls, to libraries, to churches, to high schools, elementary schools. So we're all over the place that way, doing a lot of jazz. But I had always loved the paranormal, and being here in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, which is about 60 miles northeast of Philadelphia, we've got a lot of incredible history, a lot of paranormal history here too. I live right down the street from where Washington crossed the Delaware. So, we've got a lot of that history. We've got a lot of ghost stories. We've got a lot of ties to the Underground Railroad, a lot of tunnels and things like that. So there's a lot of really cool stuff around here. So, in 2016, I just decided, look, I loved all the paranormal shows, with Doug's Monster Quest and all these monsters and mysteries and all these great shows that are on the Travel Channel. And I'm looking at that and I said, I can do that. I could do something like that. So in 2016, I decided to start, and it was originally called Bucks County Paranormal Investigations. And what we did was we did investigations and told stories about the historic venues that we have in this area with ties to history and any paranormal history. And now we've morphed it into Eric Mintel Investigates because we're traveling all over the country. And we're not only doing ghosts, I mean, we're doing UFOs, Bigfoot, Dogman sightings. I mean, UFOs. And what people are seeing is absolutely amazing. So we're telling those stories.
I think that's awesome. And I'm glad that you're doing it in the medium that you are, because a lot of people are turning to YouTube, and well, YouTube's been a thing for quite a while, but
Mhm.
there's a different sort of thing when you can see something, when somebody actually goes out and does the investigations,
Right.
and there's a tangible, I can hear it and I can see it kind of thing. That's why I love us doing these on video, that we can show some of those things and sort of bring that to the people. So
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
really glad that you guys are doing it and that you're not limiting yourself. That's one
Right.
of the things. I love the paranormal shows too, but that's why I like to do a show like Weird Encounters and even some of the Sasquatch Odyssey stuff. We cover everything because people are having those kinds of experiences. And that's one of the things when I really got into Bigfoot and started doing the Sasquatch Odyssey show, I was having these people come on and tell their Bigfoot encounters. And it seemed like almost every single encounter that I was documenting, it was, well, if you had any other weird experiences or any other things going on, yeah, there's the orbs, and then we saw this ship that one time, and so I started having to literally create other shows that were more in line with those kind of encounters for people to be able to have a place to share them. So let's talk a little bit about Bigfoot. Let's start off there and talk about Bigfoot. Do you guys go out and you're doing Bigfoot investigations?
Oh,
Can
yeah.
you talk about some of those, and what are you guys finding when you're out in the field?
Well, that's the thing. The other thing I wanted to mention too is this TV show that we have. That's the means to the end. There is why we're telling these stories. We're not just telling them from the computer to people. We're going out in the field, boots on the ground investigation, and getting ourselves into some incredibly dangerous situations as well. And speaking of Bigfoot, we did an investigation, and this is October of 2021, so not that long ago. Good friend of mine, researcher Eric Spinner, who is a Bigfoot researcher down in South Jersey, he told us about this area down in the Pine Barrens. Now, the Pine Barrens I think it's about 18,000 square miles of just nothing but barrens, just basically just woods and pine trees. So it very, very isolated. But this one particular area, he said, was called the bowl, and the bowl meaning that it's an area that on either sides it goes up and then it's lower in the middle. So basically, anything up here has a vantage point looking down. So we said, okay, well, let's go. Let's start there. Let's go because there had been a lot of activity. He's been getting a lot of footprints, a lot of people giving like reports of this thing crossing the road. So we went down there, and this is crazy because we'll talk about this other thing in a little bit. But this is a week after we came back from Elkhorn, and so we're down in the Pine Barrens. We went about 5 miles into the Pine Barrens on these what they call fire roads. And I'll tell you, Brian, it was the most isolated, desolate area. There was nothing around. There was no houses, nothing. So we're going in there, and we went about 5 miles in, and then we parked the truck, and then we went about 600 yards into the woods, into this area called the Bowl, to set up a base camp. So we're sitting there, and I mean, we're literally not there no more than 15 minutes, right? So I'm talking to Eric, and we're talking about the research that Eric and his other researcher, Art Mack, they do. And we're talking about how they go about it. What's the protocols? What do they do trail cam wise? How do they look for prints? And Dominic Sittels, who's also my paranormal team member, he's also our spirit medium. So this was completely out of his wheelhouse as far as that goes. This is something that he's been on investigations, but is there a paranormal element to, the Bigfoot phenomena? And so he was tuning in on a lot of cool things, but he's talking to Art, and no sooner that we're like I said, 15 minutes, he's talking to Art. All of a sudden, we all heard a whoop in the background. Now, I on the shows that I see, these Bigfoot shows, I love those shows, but I have to say, I sometimes chuckle when I hear these guys whooping and hollering, right? And it's no disrespect, but I'm saying to myself, man, is that what they sound like? And then to hear that, I was like, oh my God, I'll be damned if that's not what I heard. And it just changed my whole perspective right then and there about the whole phenomena. Because not only did we hear the whoop, Eric's wife, who was also on the investigation, she starts answering it back, and it's answering her back, and they're having a conversation. So if you could picture this, it's pitch black. We've got the night vision camera on, but it's completely pitch black, and you hear this conversation going back and forth. It was the spookiest thing I've ever encountered, ever heard. Well, the second most spookiest thing, I should say. But that was amazing. And then all night long, we kept hearing all this rustling sound going behind us, going on, and there was no wind, nothing like that. And we're hearing the rustling, but we're also seeing red eye shine, like red pinpoints of light, which is another phenomena that's been going on in that area, and these red glowing eyes. So this was like another situation that we got into. Like I said, no sooner did we get in there. And I always blame Dominic. I always say, Dominic, I think you're the magnet, man. You're the guy that's bringing this all out, because half the time we go on these investigations, he's the one that's like bringing in these spirits, I think,
It definitely sounds like a hairy situation, man.
It was crazy. It was really, really nuts. And just to have that kind of like evidence right there captured on camera, and folks could see that video. It's called the Pine Barrens Bigfoot. And we're going to be doing a follow-up investigation down there this September. And we're going to go and do another night investigation, stay a little longer. We're going to get in the woods a little bit more and see what else we could find. We're going to look for prints, because once we heard that, everything got rattled, man. Everything kind of like, when you're on an investigation and you're focused on one thing, suddenly that happens, and it takes it into a whole new direction. And we were doing tree knocks, and we didn't get any knocks back, but we kept hearing these whoops, and we kept hearing these really weird howls. Now, it could have been coyote, I don't know, but it was very, very strange. But we heard these really deep whoops, and that was something that people could definitely hear on the video.
Yeah, the vocalizations, I've said it so many times on the show before, are some of the most fascinating thing. Those and obviously the footprints that are left behind that people are able to cast and take a look at. Cliff Brackman and I have talked about that at nauseum about what you can find. Like Cliff goes out now and he's not necessarily looking to even have an interaction with these things. He's seen them
Right.
through thermals, but of course he'd love to have a daylight sighting and maybe get something on film. But for Cliff, he goes out looking for footprints because the morphology and the feet, and very much like the Sierra sounds and some of the other things that people are familiar with the vocalizations. You know, David Ellis at the Olympic Project is doing a ton of work and analyzing these vocalizations. We've heard weird things here on the property in North Carolina that I can't explain. People are hearing them everywhere: Florida, Tennessee, North Carolina, on the West Coast, Pacific Northwest, in Canada. Right. So there's got to be a there. I'm just not sure exactly what it is because, as people know, I'm pretty skeptical when it comes to most everything. And I haven't had an experience with a Bigfoot. I haven't seen one. So I'm kind of on the fence about, is any of this real at all? Right.
Yeah. And you just said it. I go into a lot of these same exact with that same mindset. I'm going in with that skeptical mindset. Like, okay, I want to see this. I want to see this physical thing. I want to see something. And especially when we go in with a ghost situation, I go into that more skeptically than I do say UFOs, because I've had experiences with UFOs. And the Bigfoot phenomena and Dogman sightings that we've encountered. So that's changed my whole perspective. But when it comes to ghosts, I go into that with a little bit more skepticism. But also, with that being said, and what we've actually caught on video, with ghosts, that's another thing that's getting me like thinking, wow, there's definitely something there that's like a very thin veil from here to there, that people are seeing something. People are seeing these things. And I always go with the fact of like, could it be that people's antenna are somehow more attuned to these phenomena somehow or some way? Are they, because I think we all work on frequency. And I think sometimes people are working at those particular frequencies that they're able to see these UFOs, or they just happen to, see a Bigfoot, be in the right place at the right time. So that to me is fascinating. That's why I love this paranormal genre. I just love the investigations, love going into these situations where, people have seen like a week earlier, they just saw this sighting. And to be on site and get that and try to get that information and try to get it on camera is like incredible. And if you could do that, and it's a rarity to be able to do that, but if you get that footage, and that's the other thing too, it's like we're trying to figure out what the truth is, right? It's like, what is the truth? That's, we always leave with more questions than answers because it's mind blowing. There was a report recently, a woman, and not to go to the Beast of Bray Road right away, but and we'll talk about that too. But there was a report of a woman seeing a creature that, as it got closer, it's like edges were like pixelated. It was like as it got closer, it was harder to see. And that was really weird too. I'm thinking to myself, what, it's like deer. Deer are really good at blending into their environment. What about Bigfoot? I mean, the Bigfoot could be right there in front of you, but yet it could be blended into the environment so much that's why we're not seeing it. Or could it be, I mean, it's an out there way of thinking. Could it be interdimensional? That's another thing that we're all talking about. Are these things able to go in and out of our reality somehow? And that's another thing that, that's been talked about. And portals, are there portals that these things are going in and out of? And and I'm tending to think that there are portals all over the world, and that have higher energies than other areas. So, I mean, it's just fascinating, man. I mean, that's something you could talk about forever and just never get any kind of clear answer.
It's one of the things I say on the show all the time. At the end of every interview, I usually have more questions than answers. And the only thing that I can ever agree on with whoever I'm happen to be talking to about the subject is the one thing we can all agree on is the phenomenon itself is real.
Yeah.
Outside of that, everything else, the jury is pretty much out on most other things for me.
And I never discount what people are seeing. I mean, obviously, I'm pretty good at discerning the BS from what people are actually seeing. I mean, you do get those reports. I mean, I've gotten messages from people saying, help us, our house is haunted. Please help us. And I'm like, well, I don't really do that. But let me put you in touch with somebody that does do that, that can go in and cleanse the house, so to speak. And I never want to mislead anybody that way, because our research is really nuts and bolts, boots on the ground, and and trying to get those answers and trying to figure out what are people seeing. And that was the other thing with the Bigfoot investigation. It was like, what are we hearing? What is this thing? And it wasn't anything like any kind of fear. It was nothing like that. It was like, I mean, who knows? The thing could have came at us, and ripped us to shreds. But I didn't feel that. It was more of a sense of like, what are we hearing? And let's try to get this thing on video somehow. And it was weird too, because you could hear this whoop. It sounded like a juvenile, and that was the other thing. There had been a lot of juvenile Bigfoot sightings in that area, so it sounded like a more of a higher whoop sound that was going away from us. And then the rustling sound we heard, it was more of a bigger rustling sound. So we thought maybe that was the mama Bigfoot coming to get the juvenile, and they were both going away at that point. And we didn't see any tracks because, when you're in the pine barrens like that, the foliage is so thick on the ground. And there's some areas that are sandy and that you can get a track. But in that area, it was just leaves. There was trees down, and it was just really hard to get any kind of footprint evidence.
Yeah, I've talked to so many people who have had face-to-face sightings of Bigfoot, right? And they are 100% convinced. Obviously, seeing is believing. And so I have a difficult time with people that I interview that know these things are real when I say, I'm not really sure. But I interviewed a gentleman recently, just a couple of days ago. His show hasn't aired yet. It'll air here in the next couple of weeks on Sasquatch Odyssey. His name's Doug. He was a 23-year, I believe he did 23 years as a constable out in Pennsylvania. And he was out in I believe it was Farmington, Pennsylvania. They were building this new, it was a windmill farm out in Farmington, PA. And this was like 2011. And they hired him sort of, I did that when I was a cop. We had extra jobs, you work side jobs to make extra money. They hired him to do security overnight. And almost immediately, he's out in the middle of frickin' nowhere. I looked this place up and found some video of it up and running now today, because we're talking, it was 2011 when this was going on. And I looked at it today and I thought, holy shit, this is like in the middle of nowhere. And they're building this stuff and they're clearing and doing all these things. And he's sitting out. He starts getting immediately, almost the first night, he's getting rocks thrown at his car. He's having vocalizations, whoops, screams, and all this activity. And it all eventually culminated in him having a sighting. He saw this thing from like 20 yards away. Wow. It stood up, and he gets out, pulls his weapon, and chases it behind a trailer. You guys will have to tune in. Doug tells the story a whole lot better than I do because he was there. But
that's wild.
It is. It's a really wild story. And I looked into this dude's eyes when I'm interviewing him, and he is absolutely sincere in what he experienced.
Yeah. So
anecdotally, the evidence is certainly there. There's enough footprint evidence out there. There's enough vocalizations caught on tape. I just did a whole show with Scott Nelson about the Sierra Sounds. I've had Ron Moorhead on the show a couple of times talking about the Sierra Sounds. So there's definitely enough there. It just fascinates me that we're in 2023 and we don't have more proof that they're out there. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely. And, here's the other thing too. We're also 2023 and we've got so much more digital technology that could be faked, and there's a lot of fakery going on out there. I mean, I've seen so many posts on people that are seeing Bigfoot and it's nothing there. I mean, there's or it's a CGI, and that's doing us a disservice because we want to see that really good evidence there. And, God bless her. I had a woman that she was messaging me photo after photo after photo. I mean, honest to God, like over 100 photos of her backyard where she's saying there's Bigfoot, there's a Dogman. And it was just pareidolia, where you're seeing something in the trees. And I didn't have the heart to say there's nothing there. But finally, I think after the 110th photo, I said, I don't think there's anything there, and then that kind of stopped. But no, and then you get people that do get those sightings, and unfortunately, that's the other thing too, where they're not readily available with their camera, because it's your mind is trying to put this thing together, and it's like people having a UFO sighting. I mean, you're trying to get, trying to put your head in together with this thing. What is this thing? And sometimes you're not thinking to get a picture of this thing. I had my own UFO sighting back in 2016 with my girlfriend. We were going over a bridge, and we still have to this day, can't figure out what it was, but it was just the classic, what you see on TV, those 5 orange orbs just appeared out of nowhere. We're going over this bridge, and I look over and I'm like, what the hell is that? And in my rational mind, I'm like, well, there's a restaurant there. And this is all going through my mind within 3 seconds here. I'm like, well, there's a restaurant there. Maybe they're sending off Chinese lanterns. Maybe there's a wedding going on or something, right? And then I'm like, no, this is February. It's cold out. It's a Wednesday night. No, that's not it. And they appeared, and they look like swirling lava, right? And this is over a river. And they did like a search pattern. They did like this little search pattern like this. And so when I'm looking, got the phone, was able to snap one picture. I'll send it to you. And you could see the red orb. But as they were there, one by one, they started petering out. They started disappearing. And it was the weirdest thing. They were only like 300 feet above this bridge, so they weren't really high. That's why it caught my attention, because it was so low. And then they disappeared and never saw it again. But it was just so strange. And I was like, but I also felt thankful. I'm like, my God, man, this was incredible. Like, and then a week later, I'm on a gig as a musician that now I'm on the road doing a gig, and she's at the house that she had rented at the time. And she's looking out the front window, and she sees this ball of light that's bouncing in the field in front of the house. It was this great farmhouse. It was like on 65 acres. I love that place. There was nothing around. It was great. But and the house itself was way away from the road. So here in the field, she's seeing this ball of light. Like, do you remember? You probably don't remember this, but Mitch Miller, Follow the Bouncing Ball type thing, where they would have these sing-alongs back in the 50s where you'd follow the bouncing and it would follow the lyrics of the song. Well, that's what this thing was doing in the field. And then it disappeared. So, and we just got another report of something like that similar, because right now we're having a huge UFO flap right here in Bucks County, that we're getting reports of people seeing the same thing, this oblong object with multiple lights. It's hovering very low, silent. And somebody told me that there was a ball of light that came to the top of their trees, and they looked at it. And it wasn't ball lightning either. It was just this ball of light, and it went right back up in the air again. It looked like it was doing something to the trees, looking through the trees, and then went back up again. So that's what's going on now. We're doing a video right now on that. It's a follow-up to a video that we did last year. And I'll tell you, man, Brian, people are seeing something. I always go with that, and what we're doing is meeting with witnesses. And like I said, and some of the video footage that these guys have is amazing. It's real stuff. It's not any CGI stuff.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of that out there. I talked to Nico, who works at the NABC with Cliff and Melissa, and Nico was talking about some of the trail cam photos and video that they have that people have shared with them at the Bigfoot Center, and they don't want them to show it. They don't want it to go public. So they're the only ones who've ever seen it. And he's like, it is 100% legitimate. I think it's the same thing with UFOs. I think it's the same thing with Bigfoot, and possibly even Dogman and some of this other phenomena. People capture things on film and on pictures, whatever, and they don't want to share it because it's that ridicule factor. They don't want to be called crazy. They don't want to be called a hoaxer, because that's a big thing that comes out now. And I'm one of those people. I call people out for hoaxing on my show.
Oh, yeah. Well, when you see something that is obviously blatantly a hoax, and what we're trying to do is do, research that's legitimate. You want that research, and you're interviewing guests, and you want to be able to get that information out there. And you want to have that as pure as possible, and that's why I can't stand all this, like this fakery that's going on all the time. You're talking about, now back to Bigfoot again. So Bigfoot, we had here in Pennsylvania, in central Pennsylvania, maybe around the Greensburg, out near Pittsburgh, in the 1973, 1974 timeframe, they had a huge Bigfoot UFO wave, that people were seeing Bigfoot and UFOs at the same time. And these Bigfoots had red glowing eyes. I mean, this was the thing, and Stan Gordon, I'm sure you know Stan. Stan and I have talked about this, and he was one of the guys that, when the main researcher that was there, researching all these and talking to the witnesses, and they would get descriptions. They would get castings too of these weird three-toed tracks, which was really, really strange. So you've got that phenomena that is still, and they're still going. That's stuff is still happening today out there. And so I always thought that there was a connection between Bigfoot and UFOs somehow. I thought one of the researchers that we talked to had a brilliant hypothesis on this. Like, you know how people are, with the alien abduction phenomena, right? Why wouldn't aliens abduct Bigfoot to figure out what this thing is? And then when it's done with Bigfoot, it's dropping Bigfoot off back in the woods again. I know that sounds really out there, but it's like, but there's the connection. There you see the UFO and Bigfoot. You talked about the ridicule factor. I think in the last, like 10 years ago, yeah, would we be even talking about this as freely as we are? Probably not. I think now it's becoming so commonplace that people are having these experiences. The government's saying, hey, folks, these UFOs that you're seeing are real. We just don't know what they are. And I think that having that conversation has opened up a lot of people to all these other different, to these other experiences that they've had: Bigfoot, UFOs, ghosts, whatever. Even high officials. You had Jimmy Carter that saw a UFO, and reported it. So really incredible stuff going on out there today.
Well, you've mentioned it a couple of times. I definitely want to go there because Dogman is something that I've talked about on the show. I've had a handful of people now on the show out of 300 plus episodes on Sasquatch Odyssey. I think I've had 3 to 4 people who've claimed to have some sort of experience with what they believe to be or call a Dogman. And that just doesn't compute for me. I just can't check boxes and figure out how that type of creature can exist, because I can have conversations with people like you. I can talk to Cliff Barackman. I can talk to Nico. I can talk to Pat Spain. I can talk to Doug Hycheck, and we can have conversations about what these things might be. Bigfoot may be, like Cliff thinks, they're Paranthropus. He thinks there's some sort of Australopithecine. Some people think they're Gigantopithecus. There's possibilities that of things that have existed in the fossil record. But there's nothing to my knowledge that has ever existed that even remotely it resembles a Dogman, outside of things that you see on television. The American Werewolf in London comes to mind for me and my generation. So let's talk a little bit about the Beast of Bray Road. How did you get involved in that? And obviously, when you guys went out and investigated, what happened there during that investigation?
Yeah, we got involved. One of our great friends and fans, Ellen Collins, she is a huge fan of what we do, and is a sponsor of my show. And she had said to me, we ought to do a video on the Beast of Bray Road. And I said, well, and I had heard of the Beast of Bray Road over the years. I never really put too much, research into it, because like you, I was kind of like, wow, what is this thing? So I said, well, that would be great. I said, well, let's do it. Let's do it. I said, the only thing is, how are we going to get out there and who's going to pay for it? And she wound up paying the whole freight. She wound up paying for us to go out there. And not only once, we did a couple of follow-ups, and we're going to go back out in September to do another follow-up. So she's doing it again. But I'll tell you what, when we got out there, I, again, had no really inkling of what the Beast of Bray Road was. This really started, it was kind of like in 2020, we're all in the pandemic, we're inside, we're not, able to go out too much. So I was watching, what was I watching? I think it was Travel Channel, and I watched Paranormal Declassified. And I saw an episode with Lee Hampel from Elkhorn about the Beast of Bray Road and about the research and stuff. And looking at Lee, I thought, wow, this guy looks like he's pretty open, and he looks like he's pretty approachable. So that night, I gave Lee a call. I found his number online, and he had a website for the Beast of Bray Road, and I found his research and gave him a call. We were on the phone for 2 hours and talking about his research, all the thousands upon thousands of pictures. And this was December of 2020. And so from that point on to October of 2021, July, I think we talked about going out and doing the video. And then October of 2021, we finally got out there. And we were there from October 2nd through the 4th. And got out there, met Lee. Lee showed us the farm where he's had all of this activity been going on since 2014. He's had his own experiences. He's had his own sightings. And again, I'm like going there on this investigation thinking that we're not really going to see anything, but we're going to hear a great story. We're going to talk to some great people. Looking at Lee's photos and the videos that he's got was really fascinating. I mean, he's got hair samples. He's got castings. He's got pictures that'll just blow you away. And these hair samples were really wild because under the microscope, they're translucent. So it's very, very odd. It's very odd what's going on with this thing. So the night of, it was October 3rd. We get out and it's, we finished up looking at Lee's photos and things like that. And I said to Lee, I said, do you think we could do a night investigation in the field in the back? He's like, yeah, oh, absolutely. I said, all right, that sounds good. It was about 8:30. And we get out there and we thought we'd have to like scrub the whole investigation because it looked like it was going to rain. It was really getting cloudy earlier. But with the minute we got out to the field and to this area, we call the bait area. That's where he's been, baiting that area to get where he's had all this activity. Earlier in the day, we had baited that area with steak bones that we had the night before. Probably not a good idea, but we did it. And so we get out there and Dominic looks up and here it's clear as a bell right over this area. The sky was clear. And Dominic was with us. So it was me, Dominic, Ellen, and Ellen's son, Scott Chrysler. He was working the camera. And Dominic goes, what the hell's that? And he looks up and here it was a solid orb of light going over the field, slow, silent, and you could see other planes in the air. So it was definitely not a plane, but you could see it going over, and it's all in this video. It's called The Beast of Bray Road, Alive and Well, and people could see it. And it's going over. We're trying to figure out what the hell is it. It's not a space station. It's not a satellite. And here it's going over, and it does a little 45-degree angle and disappears. And you could see it on the video. It just completely goes away, disappears. Second thing that happened, we had like a trifecta of paranormal activity that night. So the second thing that happened was we hear this howl in the distance, very, very faintly in the distance. Dominic and I look at each other. We're like, what the hell's that? Then there's one that's closer to us. And we all say to Ellen, who's looking, she's still looking up at the UFO. And she's looking at the sky. And Dominic goes, are you hearing this? And she goes, yeah, it's coming from over that way. And it was coming from behind us. And with that, the third howl, Brian, I want to tell you, man, this sounded like a man screaming in the field. This low guttural scream, yell, growl combination that, to give you an idea of how loud it was, we had little lavalier microphones on, right? Just like tiny mics. We didn't have any big audio equipment. It was so loud that it picked it up on those mics. And right then and there, man, I had this like, oh shit. We were all like, oh shit, there's something out here. And from that point on, everybody's on high alert at that point. And of course, Brian, no protection. We had no gun, no nothing. We had nothing. Oh, just a flashlight and a radio. I mean, that's my stupidity of like going out there thinking again, we would not see this thing. We wouldn't see anything, which we're definitely going out there a lot more prepared this time, believe me. So we hear the howl, we hear all this stuff going on, and then we kept hearing, and it was completely silent. There was no wind or anything like that night. And we kept hearing this rustling sounds going on behind us. And then we're looking over in the field where we saw where we heard the howl, and you could see in the video, there's an eye shine in the corn, because the corn was still up at that point. You could see the eye shine going like this. It's like this. And it's about 6-7 foot up in the corn. And that's what this Dogman's supposed to be, 6 to 7 foot tall. And I'm like, what the hell are we seeing? And again, even on the investigation, it wasn't anything like a fear. It was that initial like, whoa, what's that? Because I was attacked by Dobermans when I was a kid. So I had that PTSD moment for a minute when I heard that. But then that went away and I was like, what are we hearing? What is this thing? So then once we saw the eye shine, we hear the rustling sounds going on behind us. We said, you know what? It's time to go because we got to get the hell out of here. Because this thing was telling, to me, it was saying, get out of here. This is my territory. Now, to be honest, physically, we did not see the physical creature. I'm not going to say that we did. We didn't see it, but we heard it. We heard it. We saw the eye shine. There was something there. There was definitely something there. And it was definitely not a coyote. It wasn't a wolf. It was not a dog. It wasn't an owl, fox, nothing like that. It was just this, the scream, the howl was something that we've never heard before. And for months after that, I was listening to different howls of different animals to try to figure out, try to match what we were hearing. Couldn't find it. And then the other thing that happened, which I didn't mention, was that there was this weird mist that came up from the field right after we heard the howls. So the mist, I come to find out later, is mists are also associated with Bigfoot activity and Dogman activity. So this mist was coming up from the field. And that's another phenomena that Lee's been having on this property. There's a picture on his trail cam where there's this weird black mist that comes up. And it's a black mist. And he's got a picture where you see this roadkill deer in this bait area. And you see this mist coming over the deer. And 30 seconds time, for those pictures, the next picture, the mist is gone and so's the deer. So that right there is phenomenal. Like, what is this thing? What's going on out there? So that's why we're doing more research on it. We did a follow-up in April of 2022. We went back out to Elkhorn. We went to the Matheson Memorial Library, and we did a town hall meeting. We had over 140 people showed up to that town hall to tell us their stories of seeing this thing. And what I came away with was not only that, it was packed to the rafters with people. It was incredible. But what I came away with was people were describing the way this creature walks, or the gait of this thing. And it was all consistent. It was just this very weird way of walking, and very fast. So this investigation is far from over, believe me. And that changed my whole perspective on what's going on out there. Like I said, when I started it, I was like, we're probably not going to see anything. To having that happen was like, wow, we hit the paranormal lottery that night. It was insane. And then there's a woman and I mentioned this earlier, that a woman had and her husband, they were driving in Beloit, Wisconsin, which is only about 30 miles or so, or 30 minutes from Elkhorn. They're driving and they look on this, like on the tree line, and they see this creature like walking along the tree line. And it's this big, it looks like a cougar, like like a lion type thing. And she said they went past it, and they were going to stop, but there was traffic coming. So they turned around, and they were turned around in the car, and her passenger side was to the field where she could see this creature. And she's looking at this thing as it's coming toward the car. She's saying that the head of this thing was a diamond shaped. It had a diamond shaped head, and it had a diamond shaped torso, and like big burly like legs, and just it looked like bulldog legs, but longer. And then as it's getting closer, it was getting harder to see. It was getting opaque, like it was blending into the environment. And her fascination went from being fascinated to fear, like what, and they got out of there. They literally just drove off and weren't able to take pictures. But those are people that I definitely want to talk to when we go back out there again. I want to get some eyewitness testimony from them and get a little bit more about what they saw. We also found out that we can get onto a few more areas that we weren't able to get onto before, and to investigate, which is because the last time we were there, we found a bedding area, and we found a habitat that could possibly be where this thing's coming from. So this next investigation is going to be like all out, man. It's going to be great.
Well, I guess a lot of people, I might be the only one, but I just associated the Beast of Bray Road and that activity with the late Linda Godfrey. And
right.
We're talking decades ago or a long time ago. I didn't really realize that people were still having these kind of experiences and seeing these things. When you go out to the town hall, what are they describing exactly as far as the physical manifestation of this thing? What are they saying? Is it more dog-like, man-like? What are they saying about
They're
the
saying
physical
it's more dog-like. It's like more of a dog, like a hybrid wolf dog type thing, where the gait of this thing is like the legs and the front legs are moving in a different way. It's almost moving in a sideways manner and not in your typical four-legged way of walking, and the other thing was it's almost gliding. Here's the thing. When we walk, we're walking like this. It's like we're bouncing up and down. This thing's like just gliding. That was the one thing that people had mentioned a lot, that this thing was so fast that it looked like it was as it should be running, but it was gliding. It was just like it was defying the laws of physics that way. And then, Brian, we did another investigation up here in Pennsylvania, of another creature which I never knew about. It's called the Beast of Bryn Athyn, same type of dogman creature that has been seen gliding. So there's a lot of connections here. And then come to find out there's a lot more dogman sightings going on than I realized, all over the country. And again, like you, I'm like, what the hell is it? What are people seeing? We had a report of a guy and his daughter where they're fishing in Hay Creek State Park in Pennsylvania. And that's out in Reading area. That's maybe about an hour from me. And he saw this thing jump from one tree to the next on the canopy of the tree. And it was like a spider, but it looked like a hybrid hyena. But it was a torso, long arms, long legs. He said if this thing was stretched out with the legs and the arms up in the air, it would have been 12 feet tall. And his research, and this guy was really he was really taken aback by this, very frightened by this whole thing. And this is a guy who's an aerospace engineer. He has nothing to gain. He's got nothing but this experience that happened. His daughter saw it. As he's walking out of the park, though, people didn't see it. And I was wondering, it might have been in the trees at that point. It might have just stayed up in the trees, because what he had originally seen was a huge arm come out from the tree to try to grab a bird, like a chicken hawk. And so some weird stuff. And again, are these people being picked as the ones to see these things? I had a discussion with Ralph Blumenthal, New York Times reporter. He's the guy that broke the story about the Pentagon's secret UFO program. He had mentioned too, in his research with the late John Mack, that these people who have been abducted by aliens or seen Bigfoot, it seems to be they're picked somehow to have these experiences. And what that's all about, have no clue. That's the part of the bigger mystery.
Yeah, I agree. And the thing with Dogman, I've never talked to anybody who had any type of what would be called a quote unquote pleasant experience with these things. So it's
Right.
it seems very malevolent. It's never just a benign kind of encounter. It's that really big fear factor, and these things scare the crap out of people.
Yeah.
And it's always seemed to me, if they are real and people are obviously experiencing something, and I don't want to take away from people's experience, but
Sure.
and say they're not real, but whatever they might be, I've always sort of attached more of a supernatural or a paranormal sort of connotation to them. Maybe these things are coming from somewhere else and they're coming in and out of our reality, because it just doesn't make sense to me that something like that would be around all the time and go undetected. And that's probably naive to say, but this coming, most of the time, I believe that there's probably a 9-foot tall, hairy hominid that's walking around in North America going undetected. So, I don't throw that out with the bathwater by any stretch of the imagination. I think it's a possibility. I'm just not sure what it is or how that makes sense to me anatomically and just existing, period. Right.
Oh yeah.
People get into it. It could be a werewolf, right? It could be a man turning into this thing and back into it. You get into all of these kind of different theories, but what are people around that area that you're talking to? Do most people think this is a flesh and blood creature? Do people sort of attribute like a ghost or a paranormal aspect to this thing, or no?
They're looking at this like a flesh and blood creature. The first, when we were out there the first time, people were stopping us and we weren't even saying anything. They saw the paranormal patches that we had on our shirt, on our jackets, and they were just telling us their stories. We're at a restaurant and word got out that we were in town, and man, people came up and told us that they were driving on Bray Road. They looked over and they saw this creature that was like running along with the car. It was a big black hairy thing. And they said, well, I think we just saw the beast of Bray Road. And it's a flesh and blood thing that's there. And what it is, but it's the descriptions are similar though. I mean, it's like gliding. It's 6 to 7 foot tall, black, hairy. And here's the thing, Brian, could it also be a Bigfoot? I mean, could it be? Who knows? I mean, it's very possible that it could be. But the thing that differentiates it, I think, is the fact of you're seeing it. The people have seen this thing like it looks like a dog's head. Like it doesn't look like a Bigfoot head. So they're seeing this, like the snout, they're seeing the ears, and that's been the description. So, and who knows? Could it be coming in and out of the reality? Could it be underground? Could it be living in some kind of a cave system? That's the other thing. There's a cave, there's a quarry over next door to Lee's property. It could be living there, and it could be undetected there and just come out at night. I had a state worker who didn't want to, he wanted to be anonymous because he's working for the state in Elkhorn. And he had said that him and his partner got out to fix the power lines. And as soon as they got out of the car, they heard this growl, the same thing that we heard. And it was just constant. And they were like, they got back in the car and left. They couldn't see it, but they heard it. And that was over by that quarry area. So that was one area that we didn't get a chance to look at last time, but we're going to definitely do that this time. Scott, Ellen's son, he builds these incredible drones, and they're like those racing drones that are like really fast. So we're going to go over into the quarry and try to get some footage that way as well.
Awesome. I love drones, man. I just bought my own recently and I've had a
cool.
blast flying it over the property here. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about some of the paranormal, some of the ghost investigations you guys have been on. I know you've been on a ton of those. What are a couple that have really stuck out where you had some really cool activity that stuck out to you and like you knew you were in it at that point? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, we were talking earlier before the show started about Georgia. We went down to Fitzgerald, Georgia in September of 21. And I worked with and I've worked with them before with my jazz quartet in Fitzgerald, Georgia. And but this time around, we went down as Eric Mintel Investigates, and we did a little history in the mysteries of Fitzgerald, Georgia. Fitzgerald, which is an awesome area. I didn't realize this was one of the first area in the country to heal after the Civil War. That they brought the Northerners down to the South to work and to live and try to work in harmony and live together, which I thought was a really great story. And so word got out that we were doing a video down there, and the woman that booked me for the tourism council there, she said, well, she got so much guff from the town thinking that we were going to go into the graveyard and dig up the Confederate graves, which we weren't, which was just crazy to me. But I said, are we going to get lynched? But everything worked out great. It was awesome. But when we were there, we went into what's called the Carnegie Arts Center, and it's right there in Fitzgerald. They do a lot of different arts and arts and entertainment. And they've had a lot of activity there. So we were there, and I think just about a week or so earlier, an African art display had just been in that center. And it was like an African warrior, all these really great pieces of art, which I think the way they described it is the artwork was infused with the spirit of that particular artist or that particular person that they were drawing or building, say, like sculpture of. So I was like, oh, that's cool. That's really cool. So we're in there, and we've got, usually for the ghosts investigations, we usually use just a magnetometer. And when Dom's on the case, Dominic wasn't with me this time. My buddy Dave Antonow was with me. And Dave is more of a skeptic than I am when we go into these. So Dave wasn't anything like spirit medium or anything like that. But he also felt like really weird energies in there. And so we only had the magnetometer, and we had an EVP with us. We don't use the spirit boxes or all those other gimmicks that that are used on you see on TV. Number one, like the REM pods and those things, they'll go off with your equipment. Like if they'll give you a false reading, and I don't want to go down that road. I want to get that, like I said to you, I want to get as pure investigation activity as possible. So we don't use the spirit boxes, we don't use the REM pods, but we do use the magnetometer. And the magnetometer was going off the charts in this area. Now, magnetometer could also, you could go to a light switch when the light's on, and that thing will go off like crazy. But all the lights were off. There was hardly any Wi-Fi or anything like that. But in this particular area that I had been standing in was where an African warrior statue was. And in that video, you could see right there, an orb came right up from behind me. And it's right there on the video. It's called The Histories and Mysteries of Fitzgerald, Georgia. And an orb comes right up from behind me. And I froze on it in the video just so people could see what it is. And we've had that happen before. We've had a lot of orbs. I talked to in restaurants. So we do a lot of investigations in restaurants, pubs, hotels, bed and breakfast, places like that. And we were talking to a server that was telling us his ghost story of this particular place, McCool's Red Lion Inn. And as he's telling me this, something caught my eye. And here I looked at the footage afterward. And here was an orb that literally just went right between him and the camera. And it was the weirdest thing, man. And it registered a little bit when I first, was interviewing him. But then a lot of what we see will be in post-production. Like if we'll hear a disembodied voice, and that we didn't hear when we were there. But we heard that in Georgia. We got a disembodied voice on camera. The orb, another one that stands out, which is this was freaky. I mean, beyond freaky. We were at the Hanoverville Roadhouse, and it's another video, a haunting at the Hanoverville Roadhouse. People could see it on my YouTube channel. We're there, and the owner sends me a video of a static camera shot of his dining room, that all of a sudden you see a chair bolt out from the table. And then 5 seconds later, you see an orb go over to where the table was, or where the chair just came out of. And you see a sugar packet container get thrown on the floor. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, well, there's a wall there. And I'm thinking to myself, again, I'm trying to debunk these things. I'm not trying to say, oh, this place is haunted. And I'm saying, well, I wonder if anybody could be behind that wall doing this, and throwing this and moving the chair. Well, with that being said, we get there. That theory was out the window, because when you're in the space that you could see, first of all, that chair, those are real heavy, heavy oak chairs. So there's no way that this thing, could be pushed. And the wall, there was a wall on the bottom of that area that was built out. So you couldn't get behind there, because it wouldn't allow you to hide behind this area, because there was a wall there, and there was stuff on it. So you really couldn't step on it. And the security camera's right there. So we would see anybody back there. So we debunked that it could have been someone back there. But this was legitimate, because he was there. He was at the property. And this was he said it was around 11 o'clock at night. And he hears this huge bang. And he goes downstairs to check it out. Didn't see anything. But it was in his back of his mind for a long time that night. He's like, let me back up the footage of the camera to see and sure enough, he sees the chair and he sees the sugar packet, but he walked right past it, because he wasn't looking for that. He just walked right past that chair. And when he saw that, he absolutely freaked out. So the night of the investigation, we got there, we went up to the attic, and the attic was like, I rarely feel any kind of like activity when we go into these places. Dominic, on the other hand, will go right to the hot spots. He can tune into that. But in the attic, we both felt that those feelings of vertigo, where you're kind of like a little dizzy, and there was something weird going on up there. So we decided to put a static camera on this mirror that was in the attic, because the owner said, whatever you do, there was a paranormal group here that turned that mirror around, And when they did that, all this poltergeist activity started, and things were getting thrown out. He's like, whatever you do, do not touch the mirror. So me being, hey, look, I like to work, and I like to work with people. I don't like to not go against the rules there. But people were saying that's what you should have done first, is turn the mirror around. But we didn't do that. But we did have the camera on the mirror, and at the end of the night, we're looking at the footage, and in the footage that you'll see, we see a shadow come in the mirror and come back down like this, and no one was up there. We were all downstairs doing our own thing, doing our investigation. None of the camera crew was up there. Nobody was up there. That was the freakiest thing, man. And it was something, and because we had the magnetometer over by that mirror, and it was going crazy. And the third paranormal thing that we're doing this now, April 14th and 15th, we've got a screening of a new video that we're doing called Hallowed Grounds at the Homestead. It's a 1759 farmhouse that attached to the property is a architectural salvage company. And they have great, architectural salvage. It's old stuff and just really cool items that, not a lot of people would see. There's very vintage stuff. But the 1759 farmhouse, it's amazing, man. I mean, it's all original. There's no additions on it. It's all original wood. Everything's original. Hardly, I don't even think it has Wi-Fi. I don't even think it has cable. So it's all like, I think they've got like hot forced air heat, and there's no central air or anything like that. So it gets kind of hot in the summertime. But we were there, and Dominic, and there's a story that's unfolding with this place all the time. There's a spirit in that house that has made itself known to Dominic. It's made itself known to the owner. The owner, Beth, her husband, Jacob, he's on the fence with it. He doesn't believe it. But what happened in the very first video is Beth got what we call bum rushed by the spirit. This spirit was trying to communicate with Beth, and it didn't want to talk to Dominic. This was a whole thing it's a whole story about this woman that used to live there. Her husband cheated on her with I guess somebody a worker, a woman at the house, and that worker had a child with the husband. And it was this whole thing where the child's buried on the property. It's very bizarre, man. But all of this activity is happening in this bedroom and on the property, in this certain area on the property. And every time we go in there, Dominic is drawn to this area, Beth's drawn to the area, and a couple of the other mediums that we work with are also drawn there. So that's what we've got going on now. We just did this other video for them, and it's part 2. It's a follow-up. And some of the stuff we caught that night was absolutely crazy.
It sounds like it. So tell everybody where they can find the music. Where can they find all of these videos that we've talked about, the audio? Where can they hook up with you?
Absolutely. You could find me on YouTube at Eric Mintel Investigates. You could find me on Facebook, Eric Mintel Investigates. Like and subscribe and follow us. And if you have a smart TV, if anybody's got a smart TV, they could put Central New Jersey Network into their smart television, and they could watch my show every Saturday night at 11 o'clock. And they're playing our videos all the time. And we're streamed on the Roku and Amazon Fire TV, and I'm on a lot of different community stations throughout the country as well. And we're working on trying to do something with the History Channel or the Travel Channel. We've been doing that, pitching some stuff for years now, but or not for years, but for like the last year. And so we got a lot of cool things in the works, but that's where mainly people could find me now. And as far as my music goes, you can find me at ericmintelquartet.com. And who knows, we may be in your area. Actually, we're going to be down in North Carolina. We're going to be playing at Fort Mill, North Carolina, in Sun City, Carolina Lakes on April 24th. And we'll be over in Greenville, South Carolina on the 23rd at the Steinway Gallery. And on the 21st and 22nd, we'll be in Hilton Head, South Carolina at the Jazz Corner. And we'll be doing a couple of nights there. So we always come down south all the time. It's great.
Awesome. I'll link to all that in the show notes. You guys go check it out. Eric Mintel, thanks so much for coming on the show, man. I've had a blast talking to you.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, man. Me too, man. It's always a pleasure. Let's do it again.